preservation of video games. I think that's extremely important. It's really, really important in the day and age that we're in right now. Video games are getting to a point where they're being trashed, they're being forgotten about, and never being picked up ever again. So I'm going to use my notes here because there's a lot of things that were on my mind when it came to this particular topic. And and I didn't want to forget anything. So this might be a new thing. I have this little my handy dandy my iPad here. So this is what got me really thinking about the preservation of video games and what we should do moving forward. So as of April the 1st, Nintendo has stopped shipping new copies of to game retailers, Walmart, GameStop, etc. They stopped sending copies of Super Mario 3D All-Stars. Of course, I'm pretty sure you can find them still, but they're like, nope, we're not doing this anymore, right? The only other way you can find it if you go to a retro store and you go try to find those games, right? And I guess my question is, what is Nintendo doing to preserve their legacy with the Nintendo Switch? They even took it off the Nintendo eStore. I'm like, wow, that's freaking crazy, right? Right. Hold on. Give me a second. Sorry. Yelling at my kids. Battle Royales. Well, hold on, King Rich. I understand what you're saying. We'll get there. We'll get there. So the very first thing I want to hit on is scalpers, okay? And I think that scalpers are a really important part of the preservation of video games and video game culture, all right? Scalpers are everywhere, no matter what part of the culture or group you're a part of. Scalpers are always there trying to take huge advantage of people in general. So the scalpers that I wanted to talk about relating to video games are the people in the sneaker game. All right, the shoe industry doesn't try to stop scalpers. Hit my face with the mic. The video game industry isn't trying to stop scalpers. They're not trying to stop. Rewind. I'm getting tongue-tied. The shoe industry isn't trying to stop scalpers, especially Nike. We got a release of the SB Dunks. We got a brand new release of the Jordans. You name the shoe, the Yeezys, and they only make a select amount of shoes, right? But here it is. They preserve it, yeah? Because they'll sit there and put a pair of shoes on ice and just leave it there. They won't wear them. They won't do nothing. And they go back and resell those shoes, which make those shoes very valuable. If they make a whole bunch of the same shoes, it's going to be similar to them. I'm being a little funny about this, but it's going to be similar to the Monarchs. You know, everybody, every dad, every man above the age of 45 has a pair of Monarchs, right? Every single kid has a pair of Air Force Ones. Air Force Ones, granted, they keep on making them because people keep on buying them. That's a story for another day. But they're not rare. They're very, very common. So there's no real point of preserving them. But when you get a certain style of Air Force One, all right, now it's time to preserve this particular shoe. So that's how I kind of related to video games in general. The problem, in my opinion, is that gamers in general are lazy. They are lazy. They'll sit outdoors for days on end for a console to say, hey, I'm the first one to buy this particular console. Cool, that's what's up. you're preserving the history and the legacy of that console. But we're not doing that for games. Where with sneakerheads, they'll sit out there for days. There's a new release of a particular of a shoe, and they'll sit out there for days. So with that, in my opinion, I think they should do that a little bit more with video games. I think they should have a Mario All-Stars, 3D All-Stars that's like, yo, this is it. That's all that we have. The problem is the archiving them. So I'm pretty sure, I'm willing to bet $1 million they're within the Nike factory. They have the ability to preserve the design because they save the blueprint or the design markings and stuff like that for that particular shoe. Well, let's take the shattered backboard Jordan 1s or the Breads and shoes of that nature. They preserve those and they re-release them every once in a while. I would also almost relate this to the Disney Vault, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But I think that's really, really important in the preservation again. So I guess the next part of that is asking, yo, developers, hey Nintendo, hey Sega, hey Xbox, Microsoft, hey Sony, what are you doing to preserve your games? Or do you have a backlog of the coding for that game? You know, I don't know. I think it's a good question. And that also leads to the next thing, which is the reason why comic books aren't as valuable as they used to be. There is comic book culture. There is culture within basketball cards and football cards and baseball cards. But what made them really, really important, what made it really, really exciting, they were made during a time where paper was scarce. So the first edition of Superman back in the 1920s or whatever time from during that World War II time, a lot of those comics are valued so much because they were trying to save money, save paper, and they put it all towards the war. So the amount of issues that were released, there weren't that many. So it made it a rare commodity. So supply and demand, right? So then when you come up to the, I would say roughly 70s, 80s, and 90s, during that time frame, they made an overabundance of these comic books and basketball cards, baseball cards, etc., where the value of these products aren't valuable anymore, if that makes any sense. So with video games, with their preservation of video games, is it necessary for them to make a few, make sure you have a backup copy and be able to reproduce that copy so that you can sell it a little bit later? Or should you just leave it alone and leave it up to retro collectors to preserve it? That's kind of what's going on with the comic book companies and like DC, Marvel, and Topps basketball cards and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess that also leads to, when we're talking about the preservation of video games and how we're going to preserve them, are emulators a threat? Are emulators a threat? Is piracy a threat? So let's really look at the definition of piracy. And I hear you. I see what you guys are saying in the chat, and we'll go back and look at that in a second, and we'll hit each and every one of you guys. So let's give the definition of gaming piracy. All right, video game piracy is a form of copyright infringement. It's the unauthorized copying and distributing of video game software. It is often cited as a major problem that the video game publisher faces when distributing their products due to the ease of being able to download games via torrents or DDL sites. In my opinion, piracy isn't the issue. It's not the issue. It's not an issue at all. Unless it's a recent game. If it's a game like let's just say, let me think. Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. That's a more recent game, or Cyberpunk, or Mortal Kombat 11, Street Fighter 5, Tekken 7. If people are pirating that game, that's an issue, in my opinion. It's definitely an issue. However, if the publisher or the developer has discontinued the creation of that particular game, should it really be a problem? Because again, we were talking about the preservation of gaming and gaming culture and things of that nature. Aren't those people that are emulating the game preserving the legacy of that game? Really? Like whether it's Super Mario Brothers or Sonic the Hedgehog, they're not producing these games anymore. They're just not. Yo, Sinbad, what's up? They're just not preserving these games like that anymore. They're not making a new copy of a Sega Genesis cartridge. They're not, for that matter, they're not within the virtual consoles that are out there. Once you buy it, and I think this is a scam itself. Once you buy it, cool, that's what's up. So the next 4 to 5 years, you're able to play that game. They update their service. They update the service. And guess what? You can't go back to the older server to get your game. So you have to go back and buy a brand new digital version of the same game that you just had. I don't know. I think that's kind of messed up. I don't know how you guys feel about that. I think that's kind of messed up, and I don't think that's fair to the consumer. So I guess the example that I can give you guys is maybe the Odyssey, or there's several things several works of literature that are free. Because they're just older things. You can't resell them. Reselling is a problem. But just, hey, it's out here for you guys to use. You can read it. You can do whatever the heck you want to with it. And it's free. You go look up the Odyssey right now. The Iliad. Homer's Iliad. Someone owns it. Don't get me wrong. Someone owns it. But you can look it up on the internet right now, download it, read it for yourself. Why the heck not? Alongside with a whole lot of other books to read, they're free. Because they're not necessarily just out there publishing it, especially in the day and age of the internet. So I think it's fair game. I don't think that they should be cracking down on people using emulators. What's the difference between someone having an emulator and a retro console store selling the game? Again, I'm not saying sell the emulator. I'm just saying the game has already been sold. It's already been bought. Then it's being resold. Nintendo is not, or Sega, or Microsoft, or Sony, they're not getting additional residuals or a portion of the money based off of the games that are being resold back to the public. I don't know. I don't know. So I think that's a good talking point right there. And again, I'm gonna get to the chat, and we'll have additional discussion after I get these thoughts out, and we can all go back and forth. So just preservation in general, I think it's extremely important that we preserve games and not end up like the movie industry. There are a lot of movies from the past, they don't exist anymore. And I think the games need to be more like the Disney Vault. Disney has preserved each and every one of their cartoons, each and every one of their movies, and they have a re-release for one movie or the other every 5 to 10 years. So they'll be like, hey, the Disney Vault is opening up its vault and we're releasing Peter Pan for the first time in 20 years. I think games should be more like that and deliver a hard copy, not necessarily a digital copy, because, you know, things deteriorate. Things don't work anymore. Like Nintendo. I don't know if anybody has the original Nintendo or anything like that. But if you have original Nintendo from 1980 something and it's been in use, guess what? 9 times out of 10, it doesn't work. You know, it doesn't work the way it's supposed to. You have to do a whole lot of things in order for it to get it to work. I know in order for me to get my Nintendo games to work, I got to use a Retron 5, and even then, it's hit or miss depending on what games it recognizes. So, you know, how about that? Some games are being remastered, but they're being remastered from scratch. Like, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you guys can fact check me on this. Ninja Gaiden, not the one for Nintendo, they preserved that, but Ninja Gaiden for the Xbox, when they remastered it from scratch because they didn't have the original data. Somehow it got lost. All the work that they put into it was lost. They couldn't backwards engineer its product. All that information got lost. And so they have to reproduce a lot of that from scratch. And there's a lot of other games that they have to do from scratch also. So now the game itself, even though that we love it, even though that we enjoy it, it's costing us more because these companies aren't preserving the game itself. So I think, in my opinion, that's problematic. That is an issue. And I have it right here in my notes. I'm just going off the top of my head in my notes. We ultimately are getting screwed over by these big companies because they are making us buy the game digitally without being able to re-download on our current console because of legacy. And rewinding back to what I was saying with the servers and all the other good stuff, it's like I think the Wii is a great example of that. The Wii shut down its servers. You cannot re-download anything from the Wii that you've gotten. Nothing. Now that I have a Nintendo Switch, I can't re-download Mario Brothers 3 or anything from the Wii. They have a full archive of stuff from that server. So I think, and follow me here, I think they should treat it like legacy technology, like a USB drive. Like, yeah, we have USB-C, but you still can take your old USB drive, plug it in, and the information and data is still there. I know that's easier said than done, but the fact that you're still able to use older technology with new technology says a lot to me in saying that these companies, in my opinion, they're being greedy and lazy and not allowing you to do that. That's just me. And still more to my point about losing culture from not properly preserving things. I said this earlier, much of early cinema was lost as films was literally disposed of once the theater runs were over. It shifted when they realized, like, hey, we really need to preserve the stuff that we have here. Like, for example, the BBC infamously had to own up to the fact it had lost most of its master copies of the iconic shows like Doctor Who. Like, that is an extremely popular show. And you lost the master copies to Doctor Who? What? That's crazy. I think that's nuts that they lost the master copies to Doctor Who. And last thing, one of my last thoughts here before I get to this chat over here and see what you guys are talking about. I'm just reiterating what I already said. We do not have the ability to go back and play these games that were on previous consoles. Another great example of this.
It's only a game.
Oh, Kenny, what's up, man? Another example of this is Scott Pilgrim versus the World. They just recently did a re-release of Scott Pilgrim versus the World. They messed up a deal, and again, I understand there was a deal between companies here. I get that. I totally understand. With Paramount, and they said, hey, that's our intellectual property. So guess what? You cannot re-release or hold Scott Pilgrim versus the World on Xbox anymore. So I get that, but we should be able to still re-download it if we already owned it. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you not let us preserve that? So really, Scott Pilgrim versus the World shouldn't be a digital copy. It should be a hard copy, so it's easier for us as game collectors to preserve the legacy of Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I just don't think that's fair for these companies to do. But what do you guys think? How do you think we need to preserve video games? What do you think we need to do as a culture? Do you think video game collectors are lazy and refuse to wait outside to get games? Thus, video game companies make an abundance of a particular video game? Or do you think it's okay that they make a whole bunch of them, not let it be a rare game? What do you think? How do you feel about that? How do you think video game companies should be able to preserve the culture of video games and video games in general? Let me know in the comments down below. Yo, thanks for watching my video. I really appreciate that. Make sure you check me out on Twitch, MD SOUL, MD Soul, right there on Twitch. And also make sure you follow me on my social media platforms. I'll see you next time. Peace.